Hello and welcome to People and Profit, our weekly roundup of the stories that are evolving in the business world. I'm Kate Moody. Coming up, he won a strong mandate to continue reforming Argentina's economy. So what's next for President Mauricio Macri? From bolivar to Bitcoin, why so many Venezuelans are turning to the cryptocurrency as their own cash loses value. And smiling all the way to the bank, we meet the French family which trademarked the now ubiquitous yellow face. Argentina's center-right coalition claimed a decisive victory in congressional elections. President Mauricio Macri's Cambiemos, or Let's Change movement, fell short of an overall majority, but won in 13 of 23 provinces. Since taking office 2 years ago, Macri's been trying to open up and modernize Argentina's economy and roll back the generous social spending of his predecessor turned political rival, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. His initial reforms included letting the peso float on currency markets, reducing state subsidies of utilities, and cutting export taxes. The poll results could now speed up the pace of change.
We have to understand that we are in a stage of permanent reform. Argentina does not need to stop and does not need to be scared of reforms, because to reform is to grow, to evolve, to progress. It's something that will generate enthusiasm, happiness. It will help us to live better, to be happier, and really share the sense of leadership and progress, which is what people voted for.
Now, for more, we can turn to Edwin Guttierez, head of emerging market sovereign debt at Aberdeen Asset Management. Thanks so much for joining us. How much of the victory for President Macri's movement is an endorsement of his agenda, and how much a rejection of opponents like Cristina Fernández de Kirchner?
Well, I really think it's a combination of both of those, really, because it really hasn't been an easy time for your average Argentine in the streets. We've had fuel subsidy adjustments, so we've had a big spike in inflation, we've had a big devaluation of the currency, so that clearly has caused some pain for your average Argentine. But equally, though, there is the strong memory of the corruption and all the improprieties that occurred under the Kirchner administration previously.
Well, as you mentioned, some of the reforms that President Macri has already tried to put in place have led to, frankly, quite difficult times for the average voter. How has he convinced them that he's putting the country on the right track?
And that really was the remarkable development over this past election. The fact that there has been pain, but yet he did get this mandate to really confirm that the people are very happy with the general direction of policy. I think it also helps that after a pretty painful recession, that Argentina is emerging from that recession and should turn in a respectable growth level of about 3% this year.
Do you think he's moving fast enough with the reforms that he's promised?
Well, I guess from a market perspective, we always want him to be a bit more aggressive, and that's just the nature of us as investors. We, of course, do not necessarily have to pay the political cost of a more aggressive approach to policy. The biggest adjustment where we want to see Macri be more aggressive is on fiscal consolidation, where the path of fiscal consolidation has been a very gradual one, which is understandable from a political perspective, because Macri really doesn't want to jeopardize his popularity by moving too aggressively and being very austere in his fiscal adjustments.
So does this mandate give him a better platform to do that, to move a little bit faster?
We think so, although the signals that we're getting from his economic team suggest that it will still be a gradual path. What this hopefully does is pave the way for some progress on structural reforms. There are a number of structural reforms which the Macri administration has promised that it will work on in its second term, things like tax reform, labor reform, and also capital markets deregulation. And theoretically, with this mandate, he should be able to make progress on all of these.
Now, Macri's also talked about wanting to increase the amount of foreign investment in Argentina. Has he made progress on that so far? Where do we stand?
Yes. If there's a disappointment thus far in the first 2 years of the Macri administration, it's the failure of that investment to materialize yet. And part of the reason, though, was that investors were looking to these midterm elections to see that, indeed, that Macri will be around for the next 2 years, would not be a lame duck before they committed capital. Because the announcements in terms of investment plans are quite substantial. There is, for instance, a pipeline of $50 billion investments that have been announced from foreign direct investment perspective. Only $3 billion of that, unfortunately, has been realized. And then on the IPO front, over the next 12 months, there's about $5 billion in IPOs that are programmed to happen. So we do think that we are at the cusp, at the beginning of an increased interest amongst foreign investors in Argentina.
Now, just a few years ago, Argentina was in international headlines for defaulting on its debt. It's since re-entered international bond markets. How's it faring so far?
It's doing quite well. One, you can't ignore the very benign backdrop internationally. It's been quite a fertile ground for emerging market debt in general. And Argentina really has been welcomed back into the fold now that it has a very market-friendly regime in place, replacing 1.5 years of Kirchner administrations, which really took Argentina on the wrong path. Now, with this reformist agenda and also with yields which are generally higher than on average, this really is attracting a lot of investment from bond investors, at least.
So do you think the president is directly responsible for this perhaps surprising demand from investors?
Yes, he is directly responsible by setting this agenda and also, importantly, bringing in a lot of talented individuals to really govern this agenda. We've seen a number of Argentines leave Wall Street to return home to take up key posts in the cabinets and also some of the top technocratic levels of governments. And these are the individuals, the foot soldiers, who are really implementing this very market-friendly agenda. And really, it is due to Macri and this market-friendly approach that has really attracted this talent back to Argentina and really holds a lot of promise for foreign investors such as ourselves.
Looking at a bit more broadly, how is the economy faring compared to others in the region?
Well, it has been a tough time for the economy over the past few years, not just for Argentina, but for the region as a whole, because of the commodity shock that took place, the dramatic slowdown we saw in emerging markets responding to that terms of trade shock that we saw. And Argentina is emerging. It is definitely doing better than Brazil, for instance. Brazil this year will be lucky to generate 1% growth. As I mentioned earlier, we expect something along the lines of 3% growth in Argentina. We look at the Andean neighbors to the west, Chile, Colombia, Peru, they're all struggling as well because of that terms of trade shock, and also the lingering ramifications of the Lava Jato scandal, which really impaired the construction industry in all those countries. So Argentina, relatively speaking, is actually doing pretty well compared to its peers. Not to say that 3% growth is fantastic by any means by an overall emerging market standard, but by a Latin American standard, it's not too bad.
Edwin Guttierez, thank you so much for joining us here on People and Profit.
Thank you.
Now, while Argentines have been voting for their future, Venezuelans are struggling to deal with their present and the recession that's led to food shortages, skyrocketing inflation, and a plummeting currency. The bolivar is now barely worth the paper it's printed on, and cryptocurrencies are emerging as a viable alternative. Although exact figures are hard to confirm, industry groups suggest that some 100,000 Venezuelans are now mining for Bitcoin. Georgina Robertson has this story.
Bitcoin has proved to be a robust alternative to the bolivar during the current economic turmoil. The cryptocurrency cannot be devalued by overprinting and so has resisted hyperinflation. The number of Bitcoin users has skyrocketed, according to experts.
I think the reason that Venezuelans have learned to use digital currency so quickly is to protect their money from inflation and to have access to a global market. For example, if you have to buy medicine that isn't available in Venezuela and you don't have access to other foreign currencies, digital currencies are a way to be able to have the possibility to make that purchase.
Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin do not need a physical bank account to send and receive money. All you need is an internet connection and some power. With electricity being state subsidized, it's now one of the most affordable commodities in Caracas, and the Bitcoin miners are making the most of it. Mining Bitcoin is not illegal, but it is nevertheless viewed with suspicion by the authorities.
Currently, Bitcoin mining in Venezuela, while not regulated, has to be kept hidden because the miners have been persecuted. These police forces are, let's say, taking advantage of this lack of regulation and have persecuted the miners, so their activities have to be secret.
Behind closed doors, the miners perform their complex computations to earn enough to ride out the country's political and economic crisis, hoping their computers won't get shut down.
You see them everywhere, from text messages to T-shirts. But did you know that the yellow smiley face is more than just a symbol of goodwill? It's actually a source of income for the upbeat Frenchman who thought to trademark it over 40 years ago.
They're round, yellow, and go by many names. Emojis, emoticons, or smileys, whatever you call them, they've become a universal form of communication and remain a French trademark. The Smiley Company is based in London. It was set up in 1972 by a young journalist writing for the French newspaper François.
Every morning when you're reading the papers or listening to the radio or watching TV, it's only ever bad news. So I wanted to point out the good news. They told me it wasn't possible. How are you meant to point out the good news? So where there was an article with good news, I'd draw a round smiley face next to it.
The very first smiley appeared in a 17th century poem by Robert Herrick. Later, it was popularized by the American artist Harvey Bell. But rights to the now ubiquitous symbol were claimed by Frank Lufrani, who trademarked the smiley. A few designs spawned countless avatars, from a Che Guevara emoji to others with their own characters and quirks. Since then, they've become a powerful brand.
And I like the language of emotions in general, and I love that you can really express your emotions with one only image in the end.
Lufrani's son has taken the helm and expanded the company's reach. In less than 20 years, he's popularized the emoticon with mobile phones. At this trade show, 300 brands are interested in licensing it.
I inspired a movement, and then it was reinvented and redeveloped by other companies. It's something I'm pretty proud of.
Smiley Company is now one of the world's top 100 licensing companies. Its annual sales top 230 million euros, and it sells more than 23 million products every year.
That's it for this week's show. If you have any questions or thoughts about the stories we've been covering, you can get in touch on Facebook at France 24 Business, or you can tweet me at Kate A. Moody. Until next time, thanks for watching.